live broadcast designer.
Like a makeover person.
Yeah.
I think
that it's 2:00, hon. Oh, we're live. Oh my God, we're live.
Definitely. Don't worry about it.
Don't do that to me, hon. You're dreadful for that.
I'm always it's always live at the right time, Louise. It might be we're in the middle of a conversation which I want to continue. So let's finish this off just now. But is there a professional that can give people advice on your your live video background? Like Louise, I'm just complimenting my co-host Louise with her amazing light system and the background and the plants, like much superior to anything I'm doing. But I'm saying, I've seen some like really important people, shall we say, and people who professionally broadcast sometimes, and the backgrounds are like, it's not particularly good. It's like,
I find that really weird. I find that really, really weird that you would have somebody who you're bringing on screen and you wouldn't say to them, let's just make sure all of what you're doing looks good. Because actually, I don't think you should say to somebody, oh, let's put some makeup on, let's do your hair. They can be authentic. But when you've got their skanky old washing in the background behind them, it's not doing anyone any favours, is it?
I agree. It's not about you, the personal appearance. Although, if you're extraordinary, if you're looking disheveled, there's a different situation there. But it's the more or less, it's almost lighting that no one gets right. And you think, you know what, bit of pro advice here wouldn't be go amiss. I think that's a business for somebody. I think someone can literally do maybe a year's worth of consultancy before everyone gets it. But advising people how to look good on camera, I would pay you, obviously. Okay, let's get on with the show. Welcome, everybody, to Brainfood Live on Air. It's episode 136, bringing it to you every Friday. We're coming to the end of the year, and really excited to be chatting with you today. Nice touch, Louise. I need to get one of those because this is a topic that's always fascinated me. Like, how do you do employer branding and talent attraction for what I've described as controversial brands, which I now understand is actually a poor title, because a lot of the companies I approached to join the show said, yeah, we can't actually join a show that would label us as controversial. So I probably should have changed it to something else. But you know what I mean? A situation where you're recruiting for a company where people already have a prejudgment on. How do you do that? Because you're always going to have the same conversation with the candidate who's saying, hey, listen, I personally don't want to work for you. You're an arms manufacturer or something. Okay, how do you actually have a conversation around that? And we're not here, by the way, to make any moral judgments about any of these institutions. We can do that at another time, another place. What we're here talking about is the professional skills required to have that conversation honestly with candidates and make sure you're still doing your job. Okay, let's kick off firstly by saying a few words to our sponsors this week. Our sponsors this week are CA3. They are an employer branding and onboarding business. I really like this company because they have this amazing, like, warm boutique vibe. I think they give tremendous service to the customers that they deal with. And I love the fact that they are also getting involved with product development as well. So they're the type of company, I think, not just consultant types that can come and give you some professional service advice, but there's tools in there that you might be able to use to improve what you're doing. So do check them out. I will share a link to their website just now in the chat stream. Okay, a quick word. Let's do some sound checks. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. We're on the Crowdcast, so folks in Crowdcast, just give me a thumbs up or a yes, you can hear me. Let me know whether the sound is okay. We are also multicasting on LinkedIn, so if you can hear me on LinkedIn, can I see an emoji or something? Let me know if you can hear me okay there. And I had to press a button on Facebook to make sure I'm live there. So please let me know whether you can hear me okay on Facebook. Okay, cool. We're getting a few people saying, yes, you can hear me okay. That's all good. All right, well, let's get on with it. Louise Triance, you know I always get your name wrong, but welcome back to the show. Great to see you. And yeah, what's new? What's been going on? You've been running events, haven't you? Various things have been going on. Tell us about
busy. So yeah, no, things are going well. Been to a couple of in-person events, which is nice to go to them. I think you have too, Han. Different events, though. Our paths did not cross. And actually, I still see a few more things coming up at the end of the year, a couple of awards ceremonies, which I hear were well attended. So, but for next year, I've got some in-person events and I've still got a lot of online events. So I don't think we are going anywhere. We will be sitting in these seats broadcasting throughout 2022, is my opinion.
I think so. And I think by the time we've done 2 years of it, it's going to be difficult to actually shift off it, because we would have developed a method around it, and it's and it'll be an exceptional thing to go to in person. So maybe it'll be like huge in-person events, and then loads of like small online stuff as well. So I think that's basically where it's going to be. I totally agree. Mm-hmm. Okay, we always talk about the newsletter, Louise. So let's get on with that. Did you read the newsletter last week? And if so, what was interesting?
I did, and there's loads of interesting stuff in there, and I did find a couple that I was going to mention. One which was about name pronunciation, which is interesting, seeing as you just butchered my name, which I don't mind at all, by the way, never offends me.
I'm really sorry. No, Louise is easy, right? But Triance, I've never even seen it before. In fact, do you know the etymology of your surname? Because I think it's quite rare, isn't it?
It is. I don't. Some people think it's French, which is why we get a lot of triumphs. But no, I did think that article was interesting. But then I decided the one I really wanted to pick was the one which was from James Ellis, which was talking about his own job search. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up was because I think there was still some level of surprise at how appalling things are. And I just think I am so cynical that nothing that he said surprised me. And that just made me feel dreadful for this space. I know there's loads of people watching who are doing an amazing job, because they're the ones who tune into this. They want to engage. They want to up their game. But everything he said in there's no excuse for any of the way in which he's being treated as a job seeker.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And I think for a person who is an employer branding specialist, I think that surprise may even be more acute if you're a specialist in the space, or someone who focuses on candidate experience, for instance, and you find yourself on the market and looking for work. Then maybe you'd be very, very heightened scrutiny as to your experience. So James Ellis, good friend of Brainfood. If you don't know him, he seems to be on the market. Great resume, CV, whatever you want to call it. He's got a great track record, but he's looking for an opportunity. So if you're check if you need to get someone in looking at your EB, he'd be a good person to talk to. But he wrote a really interesting expose, almost like his own experience, jotted down as to what it's like to look for work, even at his level of prominence. And it was really fascinating to observe. So obviously we need to do better, right? But it's such a persistent problem. You do. It's obviously a systemic thing that we, may forever struggle to solve. I don't believe it's one of these. Yeah, it's not one of these where recruiters are just terrible people. It's we're either too busy, and I know you're not enough capacity, etc. But there's reasons systemically that causes this to happen, and they're the things we need to look at to try and fix it. Anyway, what else? Give us one more, Louise.
Okay, so there was a third one, which was the one about social media, the one where there was, unsurprisingly, a correlation between if you were a complete arse online, you might not be someone who's great to hire. But what an amazing in-depth research study. I was really impressed.
I was super impressed by this, and I not many people read this, and I wonder whether it's because it is like only country data in South Africa, so it's quite a narrow group of people. People might have thought it's not relevant to me, but this is a company, Ferocian, I think they call it. They basically do social media background checking. So they basically check candidates on their social media history, see what they've published, etc., and that may be a component to how you make your decision. And they did this research, I think, over 9,000 candidates, so really extensive, that have gone through their system. And they just had ranking sort of way. They have a ranking methodology as to whether someone's high risk in terms of their social media behavior, or low risk or medium risk. And they plotted that to after hire job performance. And it was fascinating to see, wasn't it? Because we as recruiters would typically say, oh, you shouldn't look at social media. Of course, it's irrelevant. Everyone's been drunk on social media before. It's totally fine. But what these guys are saying in terms of the research is that actually there's a correlation between people they've ranked as high risk And a tenure in job, like how long did they stay? Oh, it turns out it's like 18 months less than someone who's low risk. And by the way, high risk factors, according to their research, was stuff like homophobia, sexism, racism. So this is not just about hijinks type level stuff. It's like commentary online that you look at and think, what, that's a problematic thing this person said or retweeted or reshared. And we're putting a risk number against the number of times that person has done this and then correlated it to job performance. So fascinating stuff.
Some of them were obvious because one of them was fraud. So, in theory, anyone who's displaying signs of being fraudulent online, you probably don't want them as your CFO.
Or talking about it. I mean, there was a drunk driving thing there as well, wasn't it? Some people do boast about it. I mean, it's amazing. They say, I had too many beers last night and I drove home, nearly crashing into the Mars car or something. Mate, firstly, it's a crime. But secondly, that's out there. People might actually find this. And if they're using this product or this service, then legitimately, that may cost you a job. So, worth checking out. Anyway, fabulous bit of research. I really enjoyed it. Do check it out. I've shared it in the chat stream. Okay, let's get into the show here, Louise. I actually don't know whether you know anything about this topic or whether you've got any experience on it. Whether from interacting with companies that possibly can fall into this category. And you know what I mean by controversial, right? Either they've had a bad PR moment, their normal company had a bad PR moment, or they may be working for a category of company that for some reason activates a bunch of people that really don't like them. Tom Bolt, for instance, in the chat there, has mentioned he used to work for a pharmaceutical company that had to deal with a lot of animal rights protesters because they were testing. That's exactly what we mean. So do you have any experience of working with companies on this side that have had this branding issue? And what have you learned from that interaction?
It would be hilarious if I said I had absolutely no idea what the topic was, wouldn't it? But I do.
It's totally okay. I have no idea.
No, I do. So what I think with this, I think it falls into two camps. There's businesses who have a temporary blip. So it turns out that their CEO is a sex pest and they've got to deal with that. So I don't know whether you're watching Succession at the moment. Have you watched that?
I don't, but I know exactly what it's about. So yeah.
So that's a family in turmoil with some dark secrets in the cupboard and it's affecting their share price and frankly no one would want to work for them. So there's businesses like that which might be totally legit but don't have a bad rep apart from what's happening right now. And then there's other brands. So years and years and years ago, when I was working in recruitment, we'd hire for a British American tobacco. That was difficult to hire for a tobacco company. Not everybody wanted to be associated with a business like that. We hired for Durex. And even though that ought to be a really cool brand, and it is now, 25 years ago, that was still a little bit awkward. And then there's businesses like Grindr. So if you're hiring for Grindr,
I'll point myself here because I did actually recruit for a company that built sex websites at one point. And it was like so I do know something about this. It was actually very interesting to have a conversation with candidates because they obviously led with a brand that people didn't know. They had like, it's MBC Holdings Limited or something. But they built all of these like niche forums for, people's sexual interests and stuff like this. And guess what? A lot of developers weren't interested in building websites for that type of business. Because I think they had a consciousness as well as, okay, if I join this business and build these websites, will I be able to talk about it? Is it damaging to my brand? Certainly doesn't help my own personal brand. So no. So actually I had a hell of a time doing it. So it is interesting. Like, what is TA strategy to do this? Do you like recruit from in community, for instance? Maybe that's a channel that you work in, and if you do like encounter someone and there's a big reveal, by the way, we do this. Like, how do you handle that conversation? So fascinating thing to talk about. Let's bring some of our guests onto the screen, and we'll see whether they've got any experience or any ideas. I think the truth is, all of us, I think, maybe slightly amateurs at this. I don't think this is ever a professional thing. Maybe Kat is the only person on that. Maybe Noel knows as well, actually. So there's some professionals that have consulted on this. But I'd be interested to know how you kind of navigate your way through. I suspect it's like finding your way through as best you can half the time. So actually, Adam is guest today. He's had a change of role. He considers it a promotion. It isn't really. He's on his way out. It's a slow exit. Really.
No.
But All right, I want to try and get everyone on. I think there's like 6 people we're going to bring on, 5 people maybe. So it's
I can't wait to see Kat. Hi, Adam.
Loading the screen. There's Adam.
Sam.
Oh my goodness, that is a mega change as well. I've never seen this horrific visage before, Adam. Well, we'll talk about that
basically
later.
My face. I thought the guests got more of a red carpet experience than the co-host does. Clearly
this is why I'm not going to say any more, because you are the guest today. So okay, we've actually got everyone on screen. It's a miracle. I don't think we've ever had 6 people on screen before. But let's do some intros real quick. So let's go around first. Adam, quickly introduce yourself. Who are you? What it is you do?
I'm co-founder and CEO at Candidate ID. I've been in recruitment for 22 years, and about 15 of those heavily involved in employer branding.
Fantastic. Sam, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what it is you do?
Yeah, I've been in talent acquisition and recruitment about as long as Adam. Last 15 years working in management consultancy, actually. And now I run my own micro RPO supporting small to medium-sized consulting businesses.
Fantastic. And Kat, great to see you. Welcome to the show. Can you introduce yourself, who you are, what it is you do?
Who I am? Well, I am Kat Fox, 2 friends and family. Hello, Lou. Hi, Noel. Lovely to see you again. I run Peters Fox, probably the smallest recruitment, marketing, employer brand consultancy in the world. Just me and my other half, but we have quite a global reach. And yes, we get all sorts of interesting projects to work on, from tobacco, telecoms, the whole shebang.
Kat, I have to say you were actually recommended to me by 3 different people, like separately. So I thought, okay, we can't actually do this show unless you're on it. So thank you for joining.
Well, I'm glad I paid them. Only joking.
You've got a network of people like literally chucking bungs out. I believe it as well. Okay, Noel. Firstly, happy birthday, Noel. I just read you're out of office. It's your birthday today. I can't believe it. I feel really bad by forcing you on the show. So happy birthday to you, firstly, and welcome. Quickly, can you introduce yourself, who you are, what it is you do, sir?
I can indeed. So my name's Noel Thomas. I'm the creative director of CA3 and Eli Onboarding, although most of our clients call me the director of crayons. I'm not sure if that's what they think I do all day long. So we're lucky enough to be sponsors today of the Brainfood Live, and CA3 is maybe a marginally bigger than Kat's lovely agency, and we help organisations all around the world as well attract, onboard and engage with talent through fantastically compelling communications.
This is the challenge, isn't it, folks? So I think we're all familiar with the challenge, aren't we? I think Louise actually isolated it really well. Maybe there's 2 things we can talk about. So a company that's had a bad PR moment, and the other side of it where there may be just something about the business which causes an active community to have some hostility to it. So Sam, I'm going to go to you, because you mentioned to me on our chat that actually you had some recruiting experience for a company that had a moment that was particularly poor. Can you give us some context on that? What was that situation, and what did you learn as a recruiter?
Yeah, so I think actually there might be a third category that sits somewhere in between the 2, and I think that's probably where my experience was. So I was working for a FTSE 100 listed financial services business that had quite publicly almost gone bankrupt. So they were moving into turnaround, making large-scale changes to their business. They were halving their workforce, exiting major lines of business, exiting geographies, but at the same time needing to hire really strong talent to turn the business around. So there was a definite perception in the market that the business was, struggling, and it was more than just a blip.
Yeah, you know what? That also puts into context some industry sectors in recent times that have really been hammered. Food retail, travel industry, airlines. How do they recruit right now? Because everyone is saying, I don't want part of this sector. It's a finished sector, but sometimes there isn't. Like they can come back. So how do you do it? So Sam, what did you learn in that process? Was it just a hard slog, and what you learned was not to do it again, or did you actually work some techniques in?
Actually, it was really enjoyable. It was a really exciting time. It was a really exciting project to be involved with. I was there for about 4 years, pretty much for the entirety of the turnaround. And I suppose what I learned, the key kind of takeaway for me was you need to own it. If you own what's going on, and you can credibly talk about the mistakes that have been made and where you're going, then actually you can demonstrate that what you're offering is a solution and somebody the chance to be part of the solution as opposed to the problem. So that was really the key takeaway for me. It was about clear communication, really showing that you and others understood the business and understood the problem and communicating that.
Isn't that in comms? Isn't that, and I'll speak to specifically to you, Kat and Noel. Isn't that called like getting ahead of the problem? So you're the one that just own it, as Sam says. Like, own this is the situation. It's a negative, like generally not a positive scenario. Let's declare that up front in terms of how we discuss it. But at least then we have some control over it, and we can kind of move the conversation forward from there. Is that something that is a topic or a strategy that exists in consultancy, or have I just dreamed that up somewhere? Kat, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think that's such an important question because absolutely, I agree. You should own it. You shouldn't pretend that people think working for a tobacco company is evil. But the thing is, the client, the person that owns the tobacco company, might not think it's an issue. So as a comms professional, absolutely, you recommend and say why you should be doing that. But ultimately, companies themselves have to recognise that they have an issue, and sometimes they don't want to. So research and insight is a really powerful tool to communicate back to those, guys in the C-suite to recognise it.
That's actually a really bit of interesting insight, which I hadn't thought about. So yeah, now it makes sense you say it. So because the person who set the company up obviously doesn't think it's like an evil company, but that may not be the case. Like he or she may not be aware that there is a body of opinion that would disagree with them. So you need to have an internal argument with that person, or at least make the case in order to present it that way. No, can you give us some examples? Don't name names or anything like that if you're not comfortable, but do you have any examples of where you've had to construct that internal argument in order to do that conversion? And how do you do that to get them to admit there is an issue?
Well, I certainly won't be naming names. I think that would not be a good idea. But I think ultimately, Kat's right. The person at the top might have no idea that their behaviour or the company's behaviour is wrong. I mean, we've just come through COVID, or we're not really out of it yet, are we? 2 lockdowns. There's been a load of bad press about loads and loads of companies who've behaved badly at the start. And now we're coming back to working in the office again. And you've got very senior people lambasting employees who want to be working at home. So there's loads of stuff in the press now about people saying how lazy people are for working at home, this, that. Bad press. This is just one person's opinion. It just happens to be that they're very senior. And so it's then splashed all across the Daily Mail and wherever else you might want to be reading about it. So I think there is certainly an education piece there, but just like Kat said, I mean, you've got to reach out to them with some cold hard facts. They're not just going to listen to someone else telling them they're wrong. And in a lot of cases, sometimes they just don't care, which in some ways is worse. But ultimately, you've got to then put your spade in the ground, wrong saying that, you're sticking in the ground and say, right, let's move forward. What can we talk about that's positive? So you've got to be honest with the people you're coming to. Is this the case? Give them the facts as you see it, and then move forwards onto the positives, because ultimately there's no use sort of dwelling on those spilt milk moments, especially if those individuals don't speak for the whole of the company and it's just their opinion, that's going out there.
And sorry to jump in, but just to build on that, what Noel was saying, absolutely, completely agree. So on projects that I've worked on, an awful lot of employees also feel awkward talking about some of the companies that they work for. I know when I worked at a tobacco company, I felt a sense of, well, actually, my current contract's with an evil tobacco company, and I felt quite embarrassed explaining it. So if I was embarrassed, then and employees were embarrassed, then how on earth can you expect to put a really great employer brand message out there when everyone's a bit like, I feel a bit awkward about this? So you have to use insight, and actually recruiters have a really powerful job by communicating back upwards as to what damage this employer brand or this perception of the brand is doing to help attract new people to start.
Isn't it interesting though how how people's perception of what might be an evil business these days is changing? You know, if we look at the social media companies, we look at the search engines, they're the ones that I'd certainly, some of my friends anyway, are kind of a little bit, oh, I've got a job at you know where. You know, and it's very interesting to see how the world is changing. You know, I'm sure no one looks at a tobacco company and thinks great place, but still, I think the evil corporations in everyone's eyes are starting to shift away from those kind of businesses.
Yeah, you know what, you're right about this. It's not a permanent characteristic, is it? And you can always have a view. Like nuclear energy, for instance, is now coming back in vogue. But I would guess 10 years or so ago, if you said you work for a nuclear power company, you might have encountered very similar type of backlash, or that kind of sense that you're not proud to be part of this business because of, you know, an accident or something like that that's occurred. And actually, it's occurred to me, actually, recruiting is bang in the middle of this. A recruitment agency is often perceived to be a controversial brand, or, you know, a brand, a type of company that is unethical or dodgy practices, etc., etc. So all of us might have some intimate knowledge of this ourselves. Like, have we been to parties where we've, you know, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a recruiter, and everyone like shies away, you know, that kind of thing. We've all had that type of feel. So I guess we're more intimate to this than we might otherwise recognize.
Can I just add about what Noel's point around, like, people's perception of controversy changes over time, and that's absolutely correct. And I noticed, for example, yesterday or the day before, KPMG announced that everybody that works for their organization, I think everybody pretty much, needs to work in an office 4 days a week. That's controversial, as far as I'm concerned. It wasn't controversial two years ago, but it's potentially a real problem today. So it definitely changes over time.
All right, let's isolate this as a thing. So there's a PR disaster, okay? So this is a normal company. They would not normally encounter a situation where there's activists against them. But something's happened. It's quite important, and it's in the news like massively. It could be a bankruptcy. You look at some of the utility companies, for instance, that have gone under. It could be a travel thing. How would you kind of handle that situation in terms of you know, like what's our approach from a TA perspective with that scenario having occurred? Adam, I just throw it to you first. You got any thoughts on this as a rank amateur? You know.
Sorry, I didn't quite follow the question, to be honest.
You weren't even paying attention. There you go.
I was. I didn't expect you to ask me, to be honest.
I think the accusation just that was proven there, wasn't it? Okay, let's move on to someone who isn't a rank amateur. Kat, you want to give a thought on this? Like, how do you deal with like an episodic PR problem that is significant?
Oh, yeah, okay.
I guess it depends how widespread the problem is, and whether or not it's global or if it's local. It depends how, I mean, to be honest, it's highly complicated. And normally in recruitment and employer brand, you're normally the last people to get to do anything about it, when actually we probably should be the first. So let's think about this from two angles, because I'm a real opportunist as well. So if there was news that perhaps a competitor was doing dreadful things, or their CEO had done something a bit dodgy, well, I personally would see that as an opportunity to source and speak to candidates in that particular business to say, oh, I know things might be a bit dodgy there at the moment, but why have you thought about jumping ship over here? So think about it like that. But also, I guess if you're at the actual heart of it, I would just be open and honest and speak to candidates and say, look, we're going through a bit of a rough time, but actually, because of that, we need new people to join us. We need people to help shape. So rather than talking about the present, talk about how the candidate can influence the future and make it better than what it is at the moment.
Yeah, that's a really important point, folks. So if you're making notes on this, have a think about the almost historicize the current situation. Recruiting is about the future. It's about the person's next job. This person hasn't been involved in any of these issues. They're going to be a new person coming in, and that's part of cultural change whenever you do recruit anybody. So that may be one of the things that you want to key on and make sure you emphasize in a deeper way. Noel, have you got any thoughts on this episodic bad PR?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for me, it's all about being authentic and truthful, I think, really. And if you're allowed to, and that sometimes is a big thing, if you're allowed to respond to what's going on publicly as a talent acquisition team or as a recruiter, then it's about being honest about the situation and often painting your side of the story as well, because we all know with a lot of these things, actually the press might be painting one picture, but the reality of it on the other side might not be quite so black and white. If it is, you still need to approach it in that honest way. So I would be pushing out comms which talks about it, because if you're not part of that conversation, other people are still going to be talking about you behind your back and probably saying things which are getting wilder and wilder as they go about it. So I think it's important to be part of that conversation as much as you can and are allowed to as part of the business. And if you're not, if the business says no, don't talk about it, then what other positives can we talk about from an organizational perspective, or as Kat rightly says, about what you're going to be able to do here as a new employer, I guess, ultimately. But the truth is always better than lying, because it just, we've seen it with a lot of politicians, lie once and everyone get jumps on you.
Would it be fair to say it's harder to lie these days? Because pre-social media, pre-digital stuff, like you could literally deny it, or you could literally say, look, that's just a rumor, and just plow on. And the person might not be able to research. It's much harder for the other person to do the research or due diligence to prove it otherwise. But nowadays, obviously, everyone's a researcher, right? Everyone's online and thinking they know everything. But truth is, they're able to generate at least things that look like fact to them. And it's almost like hard to use that strategy of flat denial, because the person can just come at you with things. Go on, Sam.
I'm not sure that's ever a good strategy, unfortunately, flat denial. So I think you've got to separate the two things. So first of all, probably fixing the problem isn't your issue as somebody working in TA. So it's probably your legal team, your finance team, a combination of execs. So you're going to be working with them on the messaging anyway. And then it's not so much about the problem, it's all about what you're going to do about it. It's all about the solution and how you communicate that. And as long as you own the problem and you communicate the solution in a really positive and credible way, you can come out of it looking really good. A good recent example in the news is Yorkshire cricket and everything that's going on in Yorkshire cricket. There was a problem, but actually it was their handling of the problem that's probably causing them the most pain. So as an organisation, if you've had a PR blip, as long as you get on the front foot, as others have said, and you own it and you communicate it in a credible way, actually it doesn't have to be a negative. You can invite people into the business to be part of that solution, to turn things around and create a positive outcome.
And oftentimes it might attract people as well that are attracted to sense of project turnaround or brand turnaround, or it's just, you can actually even get mileage out of it by making it a mission to change. As long as you don't
glamorize it. I was thinking about that when Sam mentioned Yorkshire cricket, and I was thinking, are there any ways that you could use that to attract people to come and fix the organization or anything like that? And I think that's very difficult. But I just wanted to add one other thing to this, which is from a real practical perspective, what you probably want is a kind of comms playbook. So you've got the sort of Q&A sort of decision tree. If somebody, and this is for recruiters as much as it is for people in employer brand, if the candidate asks this, what is our answer? If they ask this, what is our answer? And everybody needs to really understand what the answer should be, from the company's perspective. Because if they're given it from their own perspective, it could land very inconsistently with candidates.
All right, really critical point, Adam. So you're saying what needs to happen is that the company needs to create, or the TA team needs to create the company response, so that.
Well, I think the corporate communications people create the company response, and then the TA team or employer branding people then either take that raw material and convert it into what does that mean for recruitment, or they work with corporate comms to do that.
All right, cool. Did you get that, folks? I mean, I think that's not only a good idea, but maybe an essential idea, whereby you can't allow your recruiters to independently give their assessment of the situation, because they may actually, some of them might say really positive things in the right way that works out well, etc. But then you can't control that. There might be someone who says, yeah, it's nothing, or dismisses the issue, or has a different approach.
Somebody laughs it off. That's a bit of a problem. If somebody laughs it off, then that's a problem. Unless the company's actual response is to laugh something off because they really don't agree that it's something that they should be accused of.
Yeah, I think that's a critical position. Go on, Lewis.
I was going to chip in with something about, we're talking about you doing the recruitment as an internal TA function, but when you're using an agency, that adds another layer of you potentially have an opportunity to have a buffer between you and the applicant, or you're giving somebody a really tough job without all the information they need. So, and that's what I've seen as working. Yeah.
Brief them just like you would brief your internal team. I agree with that, Louise.
But what I'm interested in is, do you encourage the recruiter to hire somebody, to bring somebody in and then talk about who you are? So I've got this really great opportunity. It's in the technology space. At what point do you then go, oh yeah, and it's for this company with...
That's a really good point. So certainly when I was working at this financial services company, we did no advertising under our own brand at that point in time, because that just wouldn't have worked. But we really made sure our recruiters were very well briefed on our messaging. And another consideration when you're producing that messaging, just to Adam's point, is you've got a lot of other really important stakeholder groups. So you need to bring those in, both internal and external. So your TA messaging can't be developed without thinking about, for example, your shareholders, for example, because if you're putting out messages into the market, there are various people that can get access to those messaging, and it absolutely needs to tie in with messaging that's being put out by other teams. So this is not just a TA issue. This is something you need to work on as a senior team.
Yep. But if I can add to your point, Lou, I think it's absolutely spot on. Recruitment agencies are quite often the first interaction with the client that a candidate may ever have. So when I've worked with some of these controversial brands, it's been really important that a suite of comms tools have created for agencies, recruitment agencies to use, that has that EVP, employer brand, whatever it is, the special, it should be the same that comes from the agency as it comes from the client, because you should feel all like part of the same family, really.
This is really valuable, folks, because it obviously now makes common sense. But I do wonder whether the circumstances that occur quite quickly, because sometimes a scandal or something occurs, really catches you off guard. This candidate's in process, and you've got to deal with it as a recruiter. How do you handle that? I mean, I'm reminded actually, Adam, of Brewdog. You remember CEO of Brewdog? I mean, he, in many respects, has been an extraordinarily good recruiter, because he's kind of owned his own, this is how I'm going to do it. But wasn't it early this year, there was some sort of thing coming out, I even forget what it was.
250 former employees.
That's right.
All signed a letter saying it was a toxic culture, a terrible place to work. And their response was actually very good. They said, right, we take all this on board and we're going to look at it, rather than what they could have done, which said, well, we're a high performance culture, and so it's not for most of you plebs, it's only for people that can hack it. Yeah, they could have done that, but they didn't.
Yeah, it's a really good example. But the context I think that we need to be aware of is when that thing broke, there was recruiters out there in the middle of interacting with a candidate. That's when they need the playbook, right? So it's almost like you need to have some training on this prior to the disaster, because you can anticipate. I think Steve mentioned earlier in the chat there that if you're a substantial business of any type, there is going to be something that will happen at some point. It's almost impossible to run anything above a 50-person business and not have some episode at some stage that can cause you some bad PR. A disaffected employee, a poor relationship, a broken client relationship, something can occur that can cause you a difficulty. How do you then handle it? I can't remember a situation where recruiters have actually been trained on this. It seems to me there should be a component of your onboarding as a recruiter to say, hey, listen, this is something we don't anticipate, we hope that doesn't occur. But when it does, here's the playbook. Here's how you handle it. And that, I think, will go a long way towards eliminating some of this risk.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Noel, carry on.
Sorry. I was going to say, I think there's also a reality here, which is some of this is out of a recruiter or talent acquisitions person's remit. Let's be honest here. If there's something big that's just happened that's slapped all over the news, like the Brewdog thing, which I think is a really good example, though you might be a recruiter speaking to people, it's up to the company to react to that quickly as well and decide what their message is back to the market. And at the very least, then the recruiter or the TA team can refer someone to, here's the response from the company, whether that's a piece of paper, whether that's a tweet, whether that's a video from the CEO, however it is, because ultimately training definitely needed, but there's got to be a response from a higher power. That's maybe not the right wording, but you know what I mean.
No, I totally agree.
The recruiter. It may be the scenario where the company is slow to respond or something like that. In which case, I agree. It's not the TA team's responsibility to own the communication necessarily, but they may need to take hold of the problem and they need to force an answer if they're not getting one.
Yeah. This is what I'm saying. It's almost like the TA team doesn't dictate the company response, but they have some training in order to handle a negative outcome. Like, they should be part of like a recruiter's professional development to be able to handle some sort of external thing that they weren't in control of. But how do you talk about it? Even if there isn't a resolution, you say, okay, we're going to deal with that. Here's some information about how we're going to do it. We'll keep you briefed or have some sort of extra candidate experience kind of resourcing to that to make sure candidates in pipeline are fully up to date as to company posture and things of this nature. So yeah, very, very interesting. This kind of moves us to the other side of sort of controversy. So outside of like episodic issues, there are certain industries that generate activist opposition for various reasons. Kat, you mentioned sort of tobacco. It's a classic one. I think I remember actually trying to recruit one day for an arms manufacturer. But back in my early kind of recruiting days, I actually had an ethical issue. In the end, I didn't do it, but I went to the meeting. So it was like, okay, how do you do this? But it remains a MBDA, if you know who they are. Missiles, Bombs, and Dangerous Ammunition is the name of their business. Big arms manufacturer in the UK. And yeah, anyway, but I do remember in that meeting, the guy said, listen, this is what we do. I hope you're aware of this. If you're not happy with it, then, we're not the customer for you. You had all these agencies lined up in a room. It was like, oh, crikey, how do you deal with it? Anyway, so this type of company, how do you deal?
Companies. I mean, energy companies today, they weren't controversial necessarily 15 years ago, but, is everybody going to want to work for Shell or BP today? Maybe not.
So, okay. So what is the coaching around this then? You're in this category of business. I suppose as a recruiter, you would not have joined this business unless you were personally okay with it as well. So you're not going to get like a TA team that is antagonistic to the company mission. How do we go about sort of doing a job of crafting a TA strategy, an employer branding kind of approach to this type of business? Any thoughts?
I think if you look at, for example, an energy company, to take Adam's example, they already have very strong brands, and there's already a lot of thought put into how they're presenting themselves in the market, and a lot of that might be around their investments in renewables, for example, or how they're trying to clean up their and reduce carbon emissions. So you're not starting from scratch. You're going to have a lot of resources. You've already got, and I think somebody mentioned cascading earlier. You've already got a lot of investment in how we're presenting ourselves to the market. It's the TA's role in that case is about, well, how do we translate that into something that is relevant and specific to the candidate pools that we're talking to. So it's not about creating something from scratch in that instance.
Yeah, good point. So an established industry has already got this situation. They've matured their EB to a certain degree. What we've got to do as recruiters is quickly learn how they've done that, I guess. I mean, that's the easiest thing to say, isn't it?
And if I may, I think I always think about how I reacted when I was first approached about a job with a Smoky Joe tobacco company. And when someone asks me, why did you work at this tobacco company? I think, well, okay, let me tell you a story. Employer branding is all about this whole storytelling. And I explain how when I was first approached originally, I was like, not interested. It's not an area that I'm interested in at all. And then I heard the story about actually what they were trying to do is change the future, maybe stop selling cigarettes, doing something different. And then I started thinking about, actually, I want to do that because I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. And then when people can follow your own reasoning as to why you joined one of these controversial brands, then they can actually see it from their own perspective too. So what I'd say is, don't be scared to use your own example to help start that conversation with candidates. And to your point, it's authentic as well, isn't it, Noel?
All right, let's mark that down, folks. Write this down, make notes. You have joined this company yourself as a recruiter and as a candidate. So you can actually use your own journey in decision making and express that to candidates coming through. I guess make notes as you're going through your own sort of a job recruitment process. And when you have finally said yes, bear in mind, you're going to be recruiting people like this. So understand what worked to change your mind, understand those elements, and have that really nailed down. So use your own example. I love it. Any thoughts to add to that, Noel? Companies where, what should recruiters be thinking in terms of how to handle a similar situation to this?
I'm gonna keep on going. I sound like a broken record, but I'm gonna keep on just going back to being honest about what's there as a career, because ultimately, if you take away the controversial / bad product that these organizations might create, ultimately, then you're selling the kind of career that you can get there, the kind of people you can work with, the kind of relationships you can build, and surely that's hugely powerful. If someone's sat in front of you, having applied through your website or having been, decided they will link in with you on LinkedIn or other social platforms are allowed, then they obviously in the back of the mind are going through the process of thinking, maybe I could work for this organization. If they've completely ignored you or they aren't there, then they have already made that decision. The people that you're talking to have already made a conscious decision. I'll let this person tell me what they have to offer, and then that's your opportunity. Just tell them what you do have to offer, I guess, ultimately.
Would it be fair, Noel, you've introduced something about recruiting strategy here, which I didn't think about, but which let's lean on this a little bit. Would it make sense then to advertise more and resource less for a brand like this? Because the advertising, you would assume people who have applied, they've already gone through the process mentally about whether they want to work for this business. You don't have to do the extra work converting them about it. But when you're sourcing somebody, they don't know anything about you. And then suddenly you have to reveal, oh, I work for this company. And actually it might be a low ROI activity. So would it make more sense for these companies to actually load up their budgeting and their effort towards advertising as opposed to sourcing?
I think it's a talent pipeline opportunity, really, because you've got, you're right, if people apply to adverts, then they've already gone through the decision-making around, would I work for a alcohol business or whatever? And if they have applied, then it's likely they're going to be happy to apply again in a year's time or 2 years' time or 3 years' time. But if you continue to just advertise the whole time, then that's quite a treadmill that you're on.
I think you could be. Sorry, go ahead.
If you over advertise, that suggests a problem as well. So it's a really fine balance.
That's interesting. And as you say, Adam, a good point is if they have once upon a time responded to an advert for your company, we do a terrible job of handling non-successful candidates and we let them go. But actually, they're really precious resources for a company of this type because they've already gone through I have no problem with this. We've got to find some other way of make sure we keep in contact with these people because we may find a later opportunity or even an opportunity currently in a different part of the business that they could be highly suited to. Yeah.
What you also might want to do is if you are sourcing people and they're saying, no chance, I would never work for your porn company, then you might want to say to them, okay, do you mind if we put you into an encrypted area of our database so that you're in there and we don't keep contacting you about this because we don't want to bother you.
Yeah, good point. We never had that I was about to say as a kid, but I wasn't it wasn't child labor as a recruiter. But back in my day, so to speak, we didn't have any of that technology. You'd run the risk of actually repeatedly different agents or different consultants talking to the same candidate about a company that they may have explicitly said never in hell's chance. And of course, that's horrible situation.
Hung, you touched on something earlier, which is hiring from within the same industry. So years and years ago, I did some recruitment for Bacardi, and we just hired from other drinks manufacturers. So you got people who were looking to take a step up, but they already worked in the drinks industry. And it's a big enough space. Actually, it has slightly been made smaller now, but it was not difficult to do that. And with organisations who are prepared to take people in certain roles who don't have to work in an office, it's possibly even easier. But therefore, they totally get that space. They're totally happy to work in that space.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point. And as a recruiter, that does inform your experience of working for this type of company, because it might be you're hiring in the majority of the time from direct competitors, partly for the reasons that, they have the industry experience, but also because they don't have, if you like, a different moral or ethical reasons not to do it. I think gaming is very similar to this as well. Online gaming, gambling and stuff. A lot of people don't touch it. But you get people who are already in there. Of course, they're all right with it. They're the people you should target. So from a recruiting point of view, it's actually a really significant sort of style of recruiting you'd be doing. You should be aware of that before you say yes to one of these businesses. Okay, before we kind of...
Sorry, quickly to Louise's point, the drinks industry is one of the most incestuous that I've ever come across, where literally they will say you need X amount of experience in, and it's not just in the drinks industry, it's in specific categories of the drinks industry that they want for all these different jobs. But they're missing out. They're really missing out on innovation by doing that.
And diversity. If
probably diversity,
you're working in an industry like financial services, where everybody's trying to drive more diversity, only recruiting from other financial services firms is probably not a great strategy.
Sorry, I think you're right on that in terms of it's bad for diversity, but I wonder whether the practicalities of the situation would be you would have a bunch of recruiters that would focus on headhunting from competitors, but you'd handle diversity with a different unit or a different group, because I would think if you're a recruiter having to also deal as a hand, or you've been given instruction, you need to recruit from people outside of the industry as well as hit your target headcount, but you're working for, let's say, an arms manufacturer or whatever it is, you're never gonna win. You're gonna basically fail in your job.
But that's one of the big issues, though, especially in the tobacco industry. 20 years ago, that's why it's full of the male, pale and stale. So men who got the jobs got paid tons of money, know that they get paid an extortionate amount to do a job, but if they jump ship to another industry, they wouldn't get the same amount. So they're clinging on to their jobs for their dear life, when really for the future of tobacco, it needs a whole bunch of new skills, capability, talents. So really, tobacco companies and those with controversial brands really need to think outside their existing talent pools and get new talent in to future-proof the business.
All right, Kat, that is a staging point for the next part of the conversation. But before we keep going, I just want to use this moment very quickly to say we always have a moment in Brainfood Live, new tradition, where we kind of want to make sure this show doesn't stop the conversation, because there's lots of people in the chat stream, lots of people watching in different channels. Please do go ahead and connect with each other, because you can talk about this very interesting topic with everyone else who's on the show. So take a moment to share your LinkedIn into the chat stream here and make sure it's available to you if you want to go and connect with these people. So whether it's the panelists on the screen here or commentators in the chat stream, or if you're just a lurker or whatnot and you just want to grow your network with people that care about this topic, go ahead and do that now, because why not? Let's not make sure, Brainfood is about starting conversations, not about being the gatekeeper of them. So go ahead and talk to people there. Okay, we've only got 5 minutes left. I know that. Louise, you're going to say something real quick?
I'm going to say we've got 7 minutes left was what I was going to say, but it's 6 now.
Okay, clock is ticking. Clock is ticking. So I want to just lean into Kat's final point, which is, okay, everyone does have a diversity mission. Everyone does have a new talent, digitization. We need all kinds of new ways of bringing people into the business. But then we do have this problem of EV. How do we construct a story to sell this properly? One of the guys in chat stream said something really interesting: sell the job, not the company. So it could be that we hyper focus on the job roles, So you almost have a differentiated conversation and recede the end thing and the back. I think banks can do that for tech a little bit, can't they? It's kind of like a bit boring to talk about tech, talk about the bank maybe. But you talk about the scale of the technology that you'd be dealing with. You talk about the databases that you'd be handling and all this type of stuff. And maybe that will encourage people to sign up. Any thoughts on that particularly? I mean, everyone got thoughts on it, but go to you, Kat, first.
Sorry, what are you asking me?
I'm asking, okay, let's say we do. No worries. Don't worry. I always have an eyes glaze over situation myself when I hear myself speak, Kat. So that's totally okay. But I was really just building on your last point. If you want to get some new talent into the business, what is the best approach to go ahead and do that?
Well, I can tell you a really long version, or I can tell you a really short version.
It's going to have to be the short version because the time is ticking.
But accentuate the positive and bring purpose into the company, and that's it.
And a lot of time, if you're in talent acquisition, you may have to bring the purpose into the company in exactly the way that Kat just said, because the company may not have any purpose, or it may not have any communicated purpose. And you might have to be the one that goes and, again, forces the issue to say to the CEO and the senior executive team, what is the purpose that I should be communicating here? And make them make them give you an answer.
Okay, and by the way, if you're thinking, oh, this is really difficult, I want to introduce the example of Timpsons as an example of a company that does have a purpose. So Timpsons, for the people who don't know, they're basically a modern cobbler, aren't they? They fix your shoes and stuff like this, cut your keys on every high street. But the CEO or the MD of the business has made a commitment to say, 10% of everyone we recruit is going to be from the population of formerly incarcerated. He didn't do that for any other reason other than as a public goodwill, and it's nothing at all to do with cobbling. It's a totally separate thing, and it could be one of the initiatives that TA might want to be able to bring in. Okay, let's go around real quick. Give us a tip or an example that a TA person can really sit down on, maybe think about if they're struggling with this challenge. Go to you with this, Sam.
So I think you need to think about your audience. So in the industry I work in at the moment, management consultancy, because the nature of consulting is changing with hybrid working, all of a sudden consulting companies can access talent from completely new talent pools. So consulting as a whole are having to really think about employer branding and think about, how do I talk to people from organizations that I never would have targeted before? So think about your audience. I know it sounds really obvious, but you can't, just because you've used a successful strategy for 10 or 20 years, as people have done in consulting, doesn't mean it's going to work in today's market. You need to continually be thinking about who am I targeting and what am I saying to them.
And actually, Sam, you could almost help re-educate the market a great deal, because a lot of this is preconception as well. We have talked about bad controversial brands and so on, but there is a situation where people might have a wrong perception of that company, and you can re-educate. IBM, we had the conversation with Nick Thompson a couple of weeks ago, and he said, look, just given the longevity of IBM, people have just accrued a sense of values about this business. And one of the ways in which he's dealing with it is using a lot of employee-generated content to say, there's a wide variety of people work for this company. It's not just the stereotypical old white guy engineer type person. So there's a way in which you can do it. Okay, real quick, Louise, let's go to you, because everyone's got to drop out of 3. Real quick, give us one quick tip for TA.
If you're going to use a recruitment agency, ensure they're entirely on side and giving the right message, not their own spin on it, because that feels like it could be really nasty. Yeah,
absolutely. You got to spend extra time with the briefing. That's the key point. You can't get away with just sending specs over and thinking that's it. Okay, Noel, go to you with this.
I think in a lot of ways, for me, I think a lot of this is out of your control. Where you are and where you're working. I would focus on the good things, focus on the truthful, positive stories about the job and about the business. Let the PR team decide what you're going to say about the big, awful controversy things,
Yeah,
basically.
Absolutely. Don't try and solve every problem. There are things within sort of at a lower level that you can present as positive experiences for people. And it's a little bit focusing on the job roles or the department or, the culture of a particular team rather than this macro issue that you don't have all control over. Okay, Adam, final word to you. Give us a tip for a TA team that need to think about this, or a TA person working in an EB controversy?
Well, Noel and Kat have both said things that have reminded me of something I worked on 5 years ago, where we did a very big sourcing and recruitment marketing exercise in the banking area. And it was like a company that was trying to hire out of Amazon, trying to hire out of Google and hire out of Accenture, and all these companies that are doing like sexier things than banking. And we built a microsite, which was like Lloyd's Banking Group Tech.com or something like that. And there was about 10 or 12 pages in there, which were all about the things that they were doing. And all the people that we were reaching out to were responding going, I mean, the stuff that you're doing and the challenges you're trying to solve are incredible. I would never have thought about that for a bank. It's like, look at the job and the opportunity, and that kind of thing might be a little bit more to, in Kat's words, I think, amplify the positive.
Yeah, really good point. Think about the work, think about the audience that are directly going to be doing the work. So if you're hiring for the particular function, you should address that function and focus. This is where employee generated content, I think, could be a really powerful way to communicate a different type of message. Okay, that's about it. Everyone's got to go. It's 3 p.m. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to say goodbye to Louise. She's got to run. So great to see you, Louise. We'll see you again soon. We'll say goodbye to Noel. Great to see you. Happy birthday. Have a very good very good day. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great
for our
beard,
Noel.
Great beard.
And Sam, thanks for joining us, man. Really good having your input. We'll see you soon on the show, hopefully.
Yes.
Kat, wonderful getting your views as well. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great weekend.
Take care. Bye.
Cool. And Adam, well, great to see you on the other side of the fence, Adam. I'm not impressed by the appearance, as you might know, but I'm assuming you're going to grow some facial hair back, which, you know, will solve those problems.
I just want to quickly say that Kat's point about male, stale, and pale. I've just remembered one of the big reasons why the beard needs to be there, so I look less pale and stale. How about that?
Beards communicate something else. What happens with beards is generally most people like approve of beards. This is true for men and women. I think they look at beards and think gravitas, experience, whatever is generally perceived to be a good thing. So, you know, I think don't get me wrong, clean shaven can also work perfectly fine. Lots of people wear clean shaven, but you know, beards give you a plus, like a plus 10% or something. I don't know.
My jawline was considerably better the last time that I could see it. So the beard's coming back.
This is it. You're going to need to have like a square jaw to get away with no beard, I think. But there's nothing you can do about that. Although I think there is. I think, isn't there like a movement online to say, you know, if you like practice chewing a lot, so you develop muscles, which changes your jawline or something.
Oh yeah, there is. There's a thing that you can get there's like an exercise machine. It's basically like, you know, those hand squeezers that like do your forearm. Well, you can get that thing. You can get a thing you put in your mouth and you just bite it, and it's like got tension in it, and it does do that with your jaw. The thing is, or just grow a beard.
Yeah, there's muscles around your face that you don't use, and these days that we're not chewing very hard because everything is like soft processed food, and we don't tear things off the bone anymore, right? So I mean, basically, we're a lot weaker than we should be. So masticate. That's right, Stephen. Masticate. All right, listen, that's about it. We'll see you next week. Follow the channel if you enjoy the show. We're nearly towards the end of the year. So anyway, everybody stay safe. Have a good weekend. Thank you for watching.